dramatic event here a couple of years ago when they called on the federal government, because the laws had been passed, especially since 9/11, that we would have the Department of Homeland Security make sure they take care of us completely and totally. So we have a hurricane hit, very, very severe. A lot of people suffered, wiped out nearly a city, and that is New Orleans. So what did we do? Did we resort to local ingenuity and local laws and property rights and the things that happened that we used in the past? No, everything was directed to Washington, D.C. We relied on total economic planning and economic control. We spent tens, I think it was nearly $60 billion, and lo and behold, it didn't work. It was a total failure on what they did. The feds went down there. What was the first thing they did? They took the guns away from the people. So as we protect and restore our liberties, we certainly want to make sure that those who are in opposition, that they understand the clear meaning of the Second Amendment. Decades now, is we have transferred the authority to run our schools to the federal government. And the federal government's running our schools about the way they repair New Orleans. Much better. And yet, medical care has been going downhill for the last several decades because the government's been too much involved, and now people are yelling and screaming that we need more central economic planning. Those same people who run our schools and repair New Orleans or pretend to repair New Orleans, we don't need more of that type of talk. We do have a financial problem. We have a lot of people who are falling through the cracks. And even those of us who believe strictly in the Constitution, there's no way you can turn all the switches on and off just as we want. There has to be a transition period. The transition period that I fear is the collapse of the dollar and everybody being thrown out on the street and have political chaos. That's a possibility when you have runaway inflation and destruction of a currency. But in the meantime, there is so much in the logic of cutting where we can cut. And I would say the easiest place to cut and to get a consensus in Washington and with the people will be to cut this nearly $1 trillion that we spend maintaining an illegal empire around the world. Save $200 or $300 million in 1 year. Take half of it and put it toward the deficit. That's a tremendous improvement. It would reassure the market. Take the other half and help the people who are taught decade after decade to be dependent on the government. You can't throw the people out on the streets who have retirement benefits and health benefits. We don't have to do that. But in the meantime, if we could save that amount of money, take care of the people in need, and then offer an opportunity to the young people and say, look, if you don't trust government to take care of you in your old age and you want to go on your own and you want to have self-reliance, we'll let you get out of this system, out of the medical system. The care of our infrastructure we can't ignore. Some of it has been around for a long time with the federal government. Some of it was not necessary, and it's ever growing. But there's always a fight over the political pie, over who gets the money, who gets to build the bridges. Sometimes they build bridges, they forget some bridges, and they build bridges to nowhere. Who knows how they do it. But what has happened today, though, is we as Americans are being taxed constantly to blow up bridges around the world. And then we're taxed to rebuild the bridges around the world. And I would say, if we could get the people to accept this consensus, save this money, don't blow up those bridges, don't rebuild the bridges, don't spend that money, and start looking at our own bridges at home and rebuild our own bridges. The Federal Reserve come in principle of states' rights by the 17th Amendment and having general elections of our senators. We know that Woodrow Wilson was idealistic enough and naive enough to believe that through force we could spread democracy around the world. But what other evil came in 1913 that we have to repeal? We repeal the 16th Amendment and not let it it's the principle of the income tax that is so evil. It is based on the principle that if the government can have a tax on our income, it makes the assumption that the government owns us. They own 100% of our income, and they give us permission to keep a certain percentage. So the rejection should have been immediate, on principle, and even a 1% tax on anybody was wrong. So today, of course, is out of control. It emphasizes this fact that they own us, and in a free society, responsibility and ownership of one's life remains with the individual, not with the government. Emphasizes the assumption that government owns our life, and that is buried in the principle of selective service and the military draft. When the government tells every 18-year-old that they must sign up with the potential of being called to duty anytime, no matter what's going on in the world, even undeclared wars, it means that they assume that they owe 18-year-olds. And they've been vetted into our system this silly, ungodly notion that an 18-year-old owes a lot more to his country than everybody else. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. You know, if our country ever became truly threatened, which I'm not anticipating because we are so strong, nobody's going to invade us. Yeah. The whole idea that there has to be the potential of calling up 18 to 20-year-olds because somebody goes and starts bombing Iran and moving and spreading the war, this is a preposterous notion. And I think what we should do as freedom fighters is to make absolutely sure that the lives believed belong to the individual. If we are truly threatened, we all ought to volunteer and participate in fighting our enemies. Campaign has been that of foreign policy, and obviously it is because we're bogged down once again. And in my lifetime, I remember being bogged down many times. I remember the last war we won. It was a declared war, and we won it in a much shorter time than we've been in Iraq. But we got bogged down. We're still in Korea. We got bogged down. We lost 60,000 people in Vietnam. And we're bogged down once again. I am convinced that one of the major reasons why we get dragged into these wars, we get bogged down, is we get into these wars unconstitutionally. We should never go to war